Welcome to the SBCA podcast, Component Connection, where we explore the people, ideas, trends, and innovations shaping the structural framing industry. Regardless of how you touch this industry, we're glad you're here. Enjoy the episode.
Hello, I'm Sean Shields, Director of Marketing for SBCA, and I'll be your host for this episode of Component Connection. I'm joined by Mike Kozlowski, President of Apex Technology. In this episode, we are going to explore what it looks like when component manufacturers get involved in building design earlier in the process, and how that can yield benefits to everyone involved. Mike, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, Sean. Thanks for having me, buddy. I'm happy to be here with you guys.
I'm excited to have you here, Mike. Well, let's start out by briefly talking about Apex Technology itself and what it is that you do. What's your value proposition?
You know, our value proposition is we save our clients time and money. And how do we do that? Apex Technology is a multidiscipline architectural engineering firm. You know, I've been involved in SBCA for almost 25 years now, and it's funny, a lot of people don't realize what we do. You know, so we do architecture, structural engineering, mechanical, electrical, plumbing engineering, even some component design for our partner company, TrueHouse. But really more than that, it's a collaborative multidiscipline group, and we specialize in building structures. We're typically focused 5 stories and less, and even beyond that, our real sweet spot is the residential home builder, single-family, multifamily structures.
And Mike, along those lines, like you're based in Jacksonville, Florida, but you don't just do work there in Florida, right? You're throughout the U.S.?
Yeah, I believe we're licensed in about 23 states, give or take. We do quite a bit of work. You know, I've been with the company since 2000. I think when I started, we had about 6 people. We're at 117 now. And we probably touch about 30,000 units a year, whether that be a single family or a multifamily unit. So really working around the East Coast. Southeast is really where we do most of our work. And we get out as far as Denver and Texas.
Well, you have a rather unique history in our industry in that you do something that most others in our industry don't quite do. As you said, you're an architectural and engineering firm and have all these other design services along with it. You clearly didn't get there all at once. So can we take just a step back and sort of talk about like, what were the experiences that prompted you to add these various design services over time?
That's a great question. You know, so we'll just start with me. You know, I graduated University of Florida in 2000 and came to work for a small structural engineering firm in Jacksonville. What I didn't know is that firm had recently, a couple of years before that, been launched as a partnership with a component manufacturer. So right out of the gate, I'm a structural engineer in the component industry. And I believe I went to my first BCMC in Kentucky. I fight to remember what year that was, but I was really born right into that CM industry and started eating, breathing, living trusses along with structural design right out of the gate. And that was good. But, you know, CMs, component manufacturers, are held to an extremely high level of detail and accuracy. And for anybody that's listening to this, architectural drawings leave a little something to be desired. And back then, we even had paper drawings. So, you know, was the wall 3.5 inches, 4 inches, 4.5 inches? Not a big deal to architecture, but components, wall panels, an extremely big deal. So not too far after I was here, we decided to get into the architecture business because we got so sick and tired of terrible architectural plans. And so we started that group and started that almost in the middle of the downturn, the first one back in the recession. Not too far beyond that, we started to see all of the focus on energy and energy performance. And so in that recession, we were able to snatch up a great mechanical engineer, and we started a mechanical engineering group. You know, we started to control our own destiny and try to get a little bit further upstream so really we could have more efficiency and a better product. You know, Sean, one of the things I did skip in there was in about 2002, we actually shifted the truss designers out of the plant environment into the engineer's office so we could facilitate that collaboration and also satisfy that responsible charge piece as well. But it has been a long, kind of history of growing the group, but we've really just wanted to do better design and get better efficiency. And when we found areas that weren't quite right. We wanted to be the solution there. And that's how we ended up with our kind of unique skill set.
Well, and Mike, beyond that too, I mean, you raise sort of the key point in that this started out basically out of a component manufacturing operation. So, I mean, correct me if I'm wrong, but the mentality that your group sort of brings to the table is not one that just ignores components or how the structure is going to be built, but you kind of have that in mind, right? Like, how do you optimize the components and the structure as you're designing the building, correct?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm an engineer. One of the things I like to say is that because I'm an engineer, I'm a slave to efficiency. That's really kind of my guiding light, like it or hate it. And I believe that's the same for the component industry. Trusses are efficiency embodied. That's why you have webbing, is because you don't need a solid triangle of lumber. You can take all the fat out and keep only what's needed. And that mindset that we have from engineering, from structural building components, that's how I look at the whole shooting match of the design industry, from design processes to actual construction processes. And how do we get better in all of those areas? I really love the component industry. Like I said, I feel like I was born there, and we have so much value to provide the industry because we think like that. We think in efficiency, we think in optimization, and we're the ones that talk to the framers when things don't work out. So we know what the field needs to create efficiency and save time and money.
Well, let's dive into that a little bit, Mike. I mean, you and I, in preparing for this podcast, we had a few conversations, and you raised a great illustration, I think, of what this looks like. You have recently sort of worked alongside a national builder redesigning some of their models to essentially increase efficiencies and decrease costs. And I'm wondering, can you share a little bit more with our listeners, what exactly you did and how that turned out? And I suppose in answering that, can you touch upon sort of the value to the component manufacturer in this case and in all cases of like engaging in that type of activity to help their builder customer?
Yeah, great question. I'll try to keep the answer short. But I believe in something called the collaborative design process. It's a word I've been throwing out there for probably 6-7 years. The dirty secret is it's just good design. There's no fancy thing. It's just great design. And great design requires collaboration and requires all the disciplines at the table so we can make quicker, better decisions. And that's rarely the case in our industry. Our industry and the world in general is very transactional. For CMs, they're typically last in line. All these guys did it before, and here, just put trusses on this. And, that it might be the most inefficient process there is. So because of that, because of the company we put together, that's really the fire that I have, the vision I have for the industry in general. And so we had an opportunity with this home builder, as we're talking about, where it wasn't just architect, engineering component. We actually had the decision makers from their side as well, along with their construction lead and their estimators. So all of them came together to optimize their top sellers. Okay, so we took the top sellers and we ran through architectural optimization, structural specification optimization. Then we started looking at components. You talked about the component designer being at the table there. We were able to create and kind of rapidly iterate the best solutions for those structures. Is the step tray more effective than the vault tray? Or should we keep the flat bottom cord? How will that be able to make good decisions and collaborate over that? In the end, turned out to be a very, very well-designed structure. You tack on the builder piece to that, they were able to take off every stick of wood, every connector, and then go to the field, audit it, and that whole team was together through the entire process. And what we did was save a ton of money, and we found the dollar bills. And that was a great victory, but it did take team. It did take collaboration. And the message I have for the CMs, kind of my vision for the CMs, is there's so much knowledge that their designers have, that the shop has in terms of material supply, material selection, optimization. If you don't have that piece at the design table with you, you are missing it. And you don't end up with the best value. I've always said that The trust designers are incredibly valuable, and I want to see the industry get the best value out of them. And having them last in line without having a chance to weigh in and collaborate with their disciplined peers, I think is a big miss.
Mike, I love as you're telling this story, not only is it clear of your passion for it, but it also raises just the age-old struggle that our industry has. You use the word incredibly inefficient. I have a tendency of thinking of like we've so siloed responsibilities in residential design and construction that nobody who has, a specific area of expertise is really sharing that with anyone else in the process. So everybody's kind of making these decisions in a little bit of a vacuum, right?
Yes. And I'm with you. I want to solve that. I want to make it better. But that is the challenge. And that is the success that we're having at Apex right now, because we continue to put those people together. Regardless of whether they're on our team or not, I really come back to that collaborative design process. How do we look at the end at that typical city center, their construction methods? Are they stick framing? Are they trussing? Are they fabricating walls? What about concrete? What about foundation? When we start to understand the end product, then we can get it all the way upstream with those disciplines and create a wonderful design that is appropriate and cost-effective for that marketplace. I think that's the ticket. How do we do it? It does take leadership, and that's a good question.
Well, and Mike, ultimately, it takes results, right? Like this builder who collaborated with you, they certainly put a lot of investment into the process, which I'm sure took several months of discussions and just defining the scope and all that kind of thing. But ultimately, in the end, they put this investment in there, they put some trust in you, you pulled it off in the field. If it didn't yield good results, that's kind of the end of it. So you are obligated in some ways to like find very realistic efficiencies that save money at the end of the day, right?
We are, but I promise you those efficiencies are out there.
Yeah.
I'll come back to the CM and their knowledge of what to do, what not to do. Some of the salesmen in the CM industry, just deep knowledge of product, different trades in the marketplace, what's working, what's not working. I mean, there's so much, you said it earlier, it's very siloed out, but there's so much knowledge. We've got to bring it together and we've got to capture it, because that is the name of the game right now. Housing is generally unaffordable.
Yeah.
And that can't continue like that. There's waste in the system. We've got many partners that are very smart. It's who can bring them together, who can bring them together to create that collaborative environment, and that's really my love for the industry. It is a relational approach to get the right people at the table and go do some great work.
Well, and Mike, that's the key, right? Relationships are the key. Technology is very important. There's lots of different aspects of our industry that are very important, but at the end of the day, the relationships are some of the most important, because they're what open doors, open opportunities, open possibilities. So to that end, Mike, when we talk about relationships, one of the things that has recently changed is SBCA has sort of reimagined its professional membership. And I know you were instrumental in kickstarting that process. It's a reimagination that aims that membership category squarely at building designers and inspectors. I was hoping to get your perspective on what prompted you to want to have the association take a fresh look at that membership category, and how do you think building designers and component manufacturers ultimately will benefit from creating a membership category specifically for building designers and getting them more engaged in the component manufacturing industry?
Yeah, great question, Sean. And you're hearing a lot of, my beliefs just in the 15 minutes we've been on here. I believe in collaboration. I believe in great design. Collaboration requires relationships. In relationships, I get back to my leadership, in our SBCA, So we've got a new professional membership, we've got the opportunity there, but how do we attract those people? And I will come back to our CMs, I'd like to see our CMs be leaders in their industries and get those invites out there to bring some of those people to maybe our quarterly meetings or to our annual show, to start getting them involved. The value there for, those individuals is deeper, better knowledge, of course. The opportunity for both parties is back to that relationship. If we're spending more time with some local architectural design shops or maybe a structural engineer local. If we get more time, we'll learn more from each other. We'll get some soft collaboration, and maybe there'll even be some client opportunities where we can visit those clients together. If we've got, say, code officials or building inspectors arriving, we can start working through some of those deeper code issues that are tough, and that was back when I joined, it was the WTCA. And that was the WTCA I recall. I remember going to my first one here in Jacksonville, and a guy named Dan Matola was running this meeting, and we had some building inspectors in, and we were doing just simple training on trusses and, how to inspect bracing. But, Dan created that space and invited many people to come there. And I believe the CM has that opportunity. The CM has strong client relationships. Architects, engineers do as well, but a lot of times they're busy, putting pen to paper. So I want to open that industry up to get those relationships going. I think that the biggest goal could be the networking opportunities, but we're going to have to bring those individuals to these shows and to these quarterly meetings so we do have those opportunities.
Yeah, and I think one of the first opportunities that we're really going to have is SBCA, in part as part of this reimagining the professional membership. SBCA is going to be hosting a live event aimed squarely at architects, engineers, building officials, residential draftspeople, to get them to a live event that SBCA is putting on that's going to give them some exposure to components, component design, component manufacturer capabilities, and begin opening their eyes to what the component manufacturers in their market are capable of doing and how they can help come alongside them and partner them. In some ways,
that's right.
Create some robust imagery around what does that partnership look like between the building designer and the component manufacturer.
Yep, I like that, Sean. I like it a lot. If we can have CMs get a taste of some of the opportunities that Apex has had to create value for our clients, that's a differentiator from selling on price.
Yeah.
And that's a really big deal because people will come to you for the relationship and the value. It can't all be on price. That can't be our only sales pitch.
But ultimately, Mike, the end result is that relationship will result in a collaboration that lowers the actual price of a project in the end because of the efficiencies that are gained, right?
I do love it. Yeah, you pointed that out. You're absolutely right. And that is what we have found. I love talking to, I talked to a CM here about a month ago and had a great conversation about how the foundation of kind of their company was to create success and efficiency for the framers in the field, to make it quicker, better, faster, easier. And I love that kind of client-centric approach to design and to component manufacturing. And I believe that is where the value lie, but we've got to bring all those people together, and the CMs are an essential part of it.
Well, Mike, thank you so much for joining us today and sharing your perspectives.
Man, I really appreciate it, Sean. I'm looking forward to the BCMC. We're not too far away, and I can't wait to get this new program kicked off and see what kind of friends we can bring into the industry.
Excellent. Well, thank you to everyone else for listening to this episode of SBCA's podcast, Component Connection. If you've enjoyed this episode and found it valuable, please like it, share it with others. Stay up to date and in the know by subscribing to Component Connection on whatever platform you use most.
Thanks for listening to Component Connection, brought to you by SBCA. If there's a topic you'd like us to explore in a future episode, email us at podcast@sbcacomponents.com.